uh, over the weekend, Alabama picked up. I know Ross, you're a big fan of recruiting news, but they picked up another recruit, another really good 4-star recruit, and the various recruiting services have Alabama ranked either number 1 or number 2 in most of their classes, most of the class rankings. Five stars, like, really, really strong recruiting. Looking at 24/7 composites, got them number 2 behind Ohio State. Others on 3 might have number 1. Whatever it is, very, very strong recruiting. And one of the things with Saban and why he was so good at Alabama, of course, was he became almost a juggernaut in recruiting. I mean, they just had player after player, the depth of their roster. They'd roll into a season with 25 stars, and one of the questions for Kalen DeBoer before he ever coaches a game was, could he maintain that? Now, I don't know if this is quite that level of class yet, but I would be very pleased if I was Alabama that Nick Saban left, but the recruiting is ostensibly just as strong, or something very, very close. And I know while Saban was there, they spent a lot of time as a program and as a school building up for the inevitable day that he would not be there, and the ability to maintain the recruiting. They spent a lot of money on a lot of different things, and seems to be paying off. So Kalen DeBoer has not coached a game yet at Alabama, but Ross, what do you think, starting off, of how he's done in everything else, including the acquisition of talent?
Yeah, pretty impressive so far, right? And he I'll say he assembled, if you look, a pretty good group of assistants. He brought a lot of guys from Washington, but he also plucked some guys who are more native of the Southeast footprint, which you need to do, obviously. He brought kind of his, I don't know if you call him like a general manager over with him from Washington, Courtney Morgan, who's pretty widely respected in the industry. So he's surrounded himself with really good people, and that's the start, right? When you're at an environment that you're kind of unfamiliar with, maybe a footprint on recruiting you're unfamiliar with, and he's brought in folks who know the landscape, and they've hit the ground running. That's one thing about college athletics and the brand of some of these schools, right? I mean, the school in a lot of ways sells itself. It sometimes doesn't really matter all that much, right? Who's in the chair, the main chair. What matters is the logo and the colors and the brand of the school. And if you do enough as a coach and recruiter at Alabama, a place like Alabama, and there's some places, right? Ohio State, Texas, that the brand is so big. You should get players and get really good players. And I think that's what they're doing there.
Yeah, I guess like Alabama recruiting well is not a news flash, but I don't know. It can fade off a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was probably an immediate hope, understandably, within the league that, without Saban, well, they just can't keep going at the same level. And they might not. We'll see. But they're not falling off a cliff, that's for sure. I think that, first of all, Kalen DeBoer was a good hire. And secondly, I think he's shown an impressive ability to maintain a roster and then to replenish for future rosters. One of the big things he did was to keep Jalen Milroe at quarterback, and I think Jalen was probably predisposed to want to stay to begin with. He's a guy that, start a task, he wants to complete a task, and he started at Alabama, and he wants to finish at Alabama. Already got 1 degree, working on a second one. But they retained, a couple of very good offensive linemen from the previous regime. They brought in Parker Brailsford, their star center from Washington. They brought in Jeremy Bernard, really good receiver from Washington. And I think Milroe and Bernard have already established a good connection. That same big play vertical sort of passing attack that DeBoer was known for at Washington. I think there's a great chance we'll see that now transferred to Alabama. And that was one of the reasons things they could sell Milroe on too. Hey, you see Michael Penix drop back and fire that thing deep? Well, you got the arm to do it too. Let's go. And so I think that helped there. Obviously, the biggest loss was Caleb Downs transferring, like superstar safety, 107 tackles as a freshman. And he's going to Ohio State, so losing him was big. It's kind of interesting looking at the Phil Steele magazine. I've got my Bible that I'll keep with me in my bag until January. But only one Alabama player on Steele's first team All-SEC defense, which is unusual there. But all things considered, current team talent level, good enough to compete. Absolutely in the SEC. Probably good enough to make the playoff. And future talent level looks like that's trending well as well.
Yeah, I think he's had a terrific start to this, and obviously he'll, always important, the SEC Media Week speech. That's always a big
yeah. I will say,
completely meaningless.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, Ross knows one of the traditions of this thing is Saban summoning people to a like a conference room or a hotel suite to kind of give his thoughts. It's off the record, but and you sit down and it's not like Saban says, "What are your questions?" He tells you what he wants to talk about, and kind of sets his agenda for here's what I think is important. And that was always really, informational and interesting, and that I'm sure will be missed, although he'll be spouting off presumably next to Feinbaum doing that or somewhere within the SEC network hierarchy there, but that was always a good part of SEC Media Week.
Saban and Feinbaum, colleagues, right?
Yeah.
Does Nick got to make the coffee? New guy's got to make the coffee for Feinbaum?
Sure.